Okay, this is Mike Sullivan. Ann Sullivan and I went on a trip to South America. We did three kind of main things. We went into the jungle, the Amazon jungle. We went and saw the Inca ruins, and we went to the Galapagos Islands. Now, the first part we have here is of the jungle. Okay, we flew into Lima, Peru. We traveled the better part of a whole day by boat, by bus, and then by boat up the river. And we got to this camp called Posada Amazonas. Very nice place. I mean, it was rustic. We'll say that. Okay, your rooms were open air, so anything could fly in at any moment, and I'll get back to that in a second. But when we got there, it got dark, and the first thing we did was we went on a night walk. Okay, this was one of the first things we saw, a female tarantula. All right, that was one of the first things we saw. Next thing, we saw another tarantula. Okay, they are really big. They're not very aggressive, but they're very large. Okay, now down here you can see that this is a fluorescing ladybug. Okay, that what they eat during the day, and then at night they glow in the dark, and it's really interesting. Now the purple there is kind of him. He was shining an ultraviolet light, but you can see up at the top of the stick there the three spots from the ladybug. We also saw a green fluorescing scorpion. So it was really neat. So we're walking in the jungle, and it's pitch black. There's no light at all. Okay, it was interesting. Then we went back, had our dinner, and we went to our room. Now, our room had mosquito netting, but one wall was completely open to the outside. Okay, and I'll get back to that again. Okay, the next morning we got up and we went on a walk going to a lake. One of the first things we saw were these army ants. Now, you notice they come in two sizes. The one all the way over on the right is like a guard ant, and we'll say it's a very militaristic ones. And if you look at the top, you can see it's pinchers, right? And the smaller ones are doing the work. Now, those pinchers, look at this. Look how big they are. They call them mandibles, okay? And they're so big and they're so strong as that some of the Indians use those. If they get cut, they use those for sutures on a cut, okay? And you had to be really careful, because if you stepped on them, you were going to get bit a lot, okay? So that's on our walk. Now, the next night, this is our toilet in our bathroom. You'll notice there is a frog on the toilet. So we call it a toilet frog, but what it really is, it's a tree frog that came in there looking for the water. Now, 4 or 5 minutes before this, we saw a rat skimming or shinnying across the floor and getting outside. So the jungle was about 100 feet from our room. All right? Next, okay. This is one of my favorite things from the trip. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I used to like to watch National Geographic presentations on television. One of the things they had on there were these things. They're river otters, but the people there call them big water dogu, or big water dogs. All right? And there are 5 of them living in here, and it's an endangered species. There are very few of them left, but they're unbelievably good fishers. Now, we got there, and they were at the end of a walk going to this lake, and I had told the guy that this is what I really, really wanted to see, and he goes, well, we haven't seen them for a week. Well, we got there on this kind of weird little boat, and there were 12 of us, and the next thing we know, they're swimming across the lake. And there were 5 of them, so there were 3 younger ones and then the older ones, but they were really good at catching fish, okay? And those are river otters. Not they're aquatic, but they don't live in the ocean. Okay, next. Okay, on the way to see the river otters, this guy came out. And it's some kind of peccary, or kind of a pig-like, because you can see its nose there, but We weren't sure if it was somebody's pet or whatever it was, but it followed us for about a quarter of a mile, and then it finally lost interest. I guess we didn't feed it, so that's a peccary. And it just kind of was like a dog, sort of, in how it acted. All right, now on this tree, you see what looks like flaky things on the side there, going up and down. You see they look like kind of like arrowheads. Those are bats. Now, those bats do not live in caves. That's where those bats spend the day, on that tree there. Okay? There's plenty for them to eat. You know, they're going to eat bugs and stuff, and believe me, in the jungle, there's plenty of bugs for them to eat. But those were also on the Oxbow Lake that the river otters lived on. And what an Oxbow Lake is, it's like a bend in the river, and then the river like goes through and it just cuts it off, and it's like a bow. Okay, so those were bats, and those are really neat. Okay, this is a common bird there, but it looks really strange. It's called a hotzin. Hotzin, and it's about the size of a large crow, and they're everywhere. All right, and they were around these little lakes and stuff in this area. And when we were on our boat trip, that was one of the common birds that we saw. But it was really a strange looking thing. Look at the feathers on the back of its head. Okay, now you'll notice there's a water glass there with a cockroach in it. Okay, it was so hot and humid there, you had to keep drinking. So I had just finished 3 or 4 glasses of water. And then, so I went to go to the bathroom. It didn't have anything to do with the water. I went to go to the bathroom, and I didn't put the glass upside down. That's the way you're always supposed to put your glass in the jungle. Well, I found out why. I came back from the bathroom to get another drink, and there's this cockroach sitting in the glass, in my drinking glass. Okay? It was a big cockroach. It was a big cockroach. Okay? Now, the next day, I think this was day 3 or 4, I'm not sure. The next day, we went for a walk. It was about a mile and a half, and we went into this blind, like a duck blind or a deer blind, because you were going to look out from quite a distance to this thing called a clay lick. And what it is an exposed area in the jungle of clay. We have them around here. Well, these parrots come in, and other animals come in. A whole bunch of birds come in here. But these parrots were really neat looking. And what they do is, some of the seeds they eat are very poisonous. All right, so the clay helps cleanse their bodies of these poisons. Plus, animals have to have minerals like calcium and sodium and things like that. And this clay is loaded with that. So I bet we sat in this blind for like 2 hours just watching those. And there were some, this earlier in the day, or later in the day, I'm sorry, there were some red and blue parrots up there, macaws and things like that. But these were just amazing. Look at the colors, the greens and the blues and everything. But they're very skittish. If you made any sound, you might lose them. Okay, that's a clay lick, and it's not just for parrots. There are other animals that are in there on that too. Okay, now, it's a jungle. So when you think of jungles, you think of monkeys. Now, there's not a lot of monkeys, but this is about the best monkey we had. And this is a spider monkey, and that's what it's on is not a rope. That's a vine that twists through in there and twists through the forest like that. And all that monkey was doing was just sitting there and just relaxing. And it just like most mammals or animals with fur, during the day, they don't do much because it's too hot. And as a matter of fact, this was a very warm day. We were on a walk looking at plants, medicinal plants, and rubber trees. Some of this was an old rubber plantation, and it was unbelievably hot. It was 90 plus. Okay, so when we got back, I bet I drank 6, 7, 8 glasses of water. It was just incredible. But he's just sitting there. Pretty sure it's a male. It's just sitting there resting. Okay. I would be willing to bet most of you have never seen this flower before. It was about 4 feet from one tip to the other, and you can see it just unbelievably red. Okay, there's a lot of bamboo around it and stuff like that, but I just really thought that flower was amazing. I just think that was neat. But those grow in the jungle. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, first off, what do you think this is? Well, there's probably a lot of guesses you have, but this is a pineapple flower. And that in the middle there is the fruit. That's what's going to grow into the pineapple. Okay, so pineapples, you know, the fruit of the pineapple tree works just like apples and other fruits around here. You have to have flowers. Well, the flower of the pineapple plant is very large. we were at what passes for a farm there. It's very different than what a farm here is, but that is a pineapple growing out of the flower. Okay, next. All right, so let's say you want a Hershey bar, or you want a chocolate chip cookie, or any kind of chocolate candy. Ice cream, chocolate ice cream, doesn't matter, okay? You have to have those white seeds that he has there in his right hand, okay? Those are cocoa beans or cacao beans, okay? Now, depending on how you treat them, they can be turned into something else besides cocoa or chocolate, but we tasted them and they don't taste anything like chocolate, and they're white and they're kind of slimy, but they tasted very nice, very, very, very sweet. And that guy right there is our guide. He was showing us that. And so again, we're in this plantation, this farm, and we're walking through there, and he says, well, if you see, some fruit sitting on the ground, you can pick it up and eat it. So I picked up one and ate it. It was very, very good. Okay? Now, look at all the beetles on that plant. Okay? That's a tomatillo plant. Okay? And you can see some of the fruits there. Okay? It's kind of like a tomato. Okay? It's kind of like a hard tomato. But what happens is that the flowers come out, and then you got the fruit, all right, and the beetles come and eat all of the leaves off, and then the next growing season, the leaves all come back, and it all takes off again, okay? And then the next day, that night we went up and had a little celebration at our Posada Amazonas. It was very nice, but it was very, very rustic. I mean, you were in the jungle, all right? But the next day we got up and we got back on the river, a 2-hour trip down the river, and we got back and we got on a plane and we went back to Lima, okay? That's the first part. Okay, so we're back again, and this is the Inca part of the trip. Now, we stayed up again that night in Lima and then left the next day, and then they took us to these, hopefully you've heard of alpaca sweaters that are very, very fancy and whatever. Okay, they took us and showed us, these are alpacas, okay, and this is a llama, okay, and this was a very, very, it's hard to tell, but this was supposed to be a very, very fancy store, and that animal there with the green shirt on, that's me, okay. Now, the next day, we went to a very, very nice place that night, but the next day, we got to Machu Picchu. Now, Machu Picchu is a very, very famous area for the Incas. The Incas were one of the conquering groups in Peru, in South America, basically. And I'm going to say the 14th or 15th century. I'm not sure about that. Maybe a little bit before that. But they built all this. And we're talking, this is at 9,000 or 10,000 feet. And they had to build all this. So what we're looking at here is some of the places that they lived. And then over on the other side over here, that was where they did some of their growing of stuff. But it was a really beautiful day. And we were really enjoying ourselves. We were going to be there 2 days. Okay, now, look at these animals. They're sort of like chinchillas, but our guide called them rabbit squirrels, okay? And they just lived in the ruins there because nothing was going to bother them. They didn't. I'm sure there were some predators somewhere, but So they're either chinchillas or rabbit squirrels, and they just lived there. Okay, now, at the very beginning of the 20th century, there was a man named Hiram Bingham that discovered Machu Picchu. All right, and this is one of the very, very, very famous pictures that he took. All right, and if you go to Natural Geographic and you look on that, you'll see these things. But it's just built into a mountain. So this is part of all of the temples and the growing places and everything on Machu Picchu. Now, to get there, you had to go up a hill, a mountain, whatever, and it had 17 switchbacks in it. All right, and right now we're at about 9,000 feet. So if I was there and I was giving you this talk there, I'd be kind of out of breath a little bit. Now, this is an even better view because you see in the background there, that peak, that mountain, that peak there, that is also in the pictures, and it wasn't in the first one I got. But do you see it's real sunny? Everything was great this day. Well, the next day we were coming back to view this some more, and it was pouring rain. Everybody was slipping and sliding, but everybody kind of was really good, and they got together and they'd help each other up the steps and everything. But this is the actual place where Hiram Bingham took his famous picture that shows Machu Picchu. Now, when they built this, this was at the height of their power. But it's in the mountains. I mean, it's I don't know how they ever found it, but they sure did. Okay? Now, the next day, we stayed in that village that night, Machu Picchu, and then we took a train back and got a bus, and we went up even further, probably 11, 12,000 feet. And believe it or not, where those people are standing right now is in the middle of a lake. This is called Lake Titicaca, and it is the highest navigable lake in the world. Now, the reason these people took to living on the lake is because they were driven there. They were driven out of their homes and there was no place else to stay, all right, and they ended up living on this lake. Well, they showed us how every year they have to, or all the time, they're constantly putting more reeds down and everything. But they have now, you notice here, they've gotten electricity. So and this is just like a year or two ago. So they have those electric cells, solar energy cells, and they use them for a little bit of electricity at night and to heat up water and things like that. But I mean, everything goes on there. They don't go ashore to buy groceries or anything like that. They catch fish, they live there, they raise their families there and everything. All right? And this gentleman right here was actually an Inca. Okay? He was descended from the Incas. All right, so that's Lake Titicaca, and it was really big, really big. And at one point, you could see 3 different countries from its shore. Okay, now this is a very interesting picture. First off, we're almost at 12,000 feet, and there's 3 different animals there, okay? This is a llama right here. This is an alpaca. Look at how heavy that fur looks. And this over here is something called a guanaco, all right? And the guanaco, if you use your imagination a little bit, you see it looks like a small camel. Well, they are related to the camel, all right? So there's all 3 of those different kinds of animals that are found naturally in Peru, okay? Remember now, we're at about 12,000 feet. So it's not, believe me, breathing was different. Okay, now, hopefully you can identify these. These are guinea pigs, okay? Guinea pigs are native to Peru, okay? They live in the rocks, whatever, and it's the same kind of guinea pig you can buy in a store here as a pet. However, these are not pets. That's food, okay? Everywhere you go, every restaurant you go, you could have guinea pig, and it was expensive, but I'm not eating any pets. I'm not eating dog. I'm not eating cat. Not eating goldfish, any of that stuff. But some of the people we were there with did eat some guinea pig, and they said it tasted okay. It was just kind of bony. All right. But what this is, it's somebody's guinea pig pen in their backyard or whatever, and they're there for food. And here's another. This is at an actual Inca lady's house, and she had just thrown some food in there. All right, and those are just some more guinea pigs that are in there. Now, this house they thought might have been built in the 12th or 13th century, and we went in and saw what it looked like on the inside, and it was nice. It was clean and everything, but it certainly wasn't a Tom Myers mansion special. Okay, now the highest point we got was at a place called Silistani. We were up over 13,000 feet. All right, and that looks like a water tower, but what it actually is, it's an Inca tomb. Now, imagine, we usually are at under 1,000 feet, and this is 13,000 feet. So breathing was very difficult. So what you did is you walked up around in front of this and did some switchbacks, and then you ended up coming up way over there onto this. But that's a tomb. That's an Inca tomb. And it was a rough day. I mean, it was rough climbing up there. Now, once you got up there, here were some more Inca tombs. Right? Obviously, they've been, broken down and, they're not doing well. But remember, we're over 13,000 feet. Now, I was doing okay, but I'll get back to this in a second. But Ann had some problems, so she had to get an oxygen bottle and get into a cold bath that night. But she toughed it out. She didn't feel very well for a while, but the next day we were doing okay because we were at a really, really nice hotel, right? But this is at Silistani, and it's over 13,000 feet above sea level, okay? Now, this is a square in a big city called Cusco, and you can see over there is a church. This is a big church. Well, if you're not Catholic, I'll explain to you. We have altars in our church where we have services. They have 13 different altars in there, and they had the only black Jesus that you could, that anybody has ever known about. Now, this day was kind of chilly and it was kind of rainy, so Ann and I were getting ready to go eat, but we were sitting on these steps here on the square. And we're just kind of trying to stay warm, and it started to rain. So we went over here and sat over here and to get out of the rain, and this dog came over and sat on my lap. Okay? So, if somebody says Mike Sullivan's going to the dogs, it's true. But there was also some celebrations going on over in this part of the square over here. And it was very nice. We ate that day in a sports bar, and it was very nice. Also, up here, you see this architecture up here? That's very, very French. Wooden balconies. That's very French. Or, very European, maybe not French. Okay, now, dogs are dogs, right? But these are some ugly looking dogs. These are not mutts. These are not crossbreds. These are Peruvian dogs. They live on the beach, and it's a breed. I've never seen one in a dog show or anything, but Peruvian dogs are a recognized breed of dogs. All right, and we've come down from the mountains now, and we're on the beach. Okay. Now, we are very close to the equator. Those are Galapagos penguins climbing up the rocks. You always think of penguins in the cold weather. Well, this wasn't cold weather. Well, that day, when we saw those dogs, we were walking to get onto a boat to go out and do this big boat trip. All right, well, one of the first things we saw were these penguins. Now, we also saw, these are red-legged cormorants. Well, I got two pictures here, and I'll show you, look at their legs. And that's maybe even a little bit better. These are red-legged cormorants, and I really thought those were neat. you know, they're living out in the middle of this bay, and I don't know, it's probably at least an hour from shore. And you know, if you think about it, what do they do? Well, they nest out there and they probably eat fish. Okay, so those are red-legged cormorants. Okay, next, in the background there, those are birds. Those are called million-dollar birds. And the reason they're called million-dollar birds is because these islands, they used to come out and mine guano. Well, guano is just accumulated bird poop. That's all it is. And they would mine it, and there's a lot of nitrogen in it. And if you know anything about farming or know anything about plants, they need nitrogen. So they literally mined this guano and made huge amounts of money. And now they only go out every 3 or 4 years. But the reason there's so much guano or bird poop there, look at all those birds. And those are million-dollar birds, they call them. Now, there's another shot of them. All that dark stuff in there is birds. Birds, 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 million-dollar birds. And they're mostly, it's like a cormorant, you know, long-winged bird and a long skinny neck and whatever. All right? So we're still out on the boat. All right? And we see these birds. Then, hopefully you can see this. That night, we got on a plane with, you know, let's see, in our group, there were 6 people. And you're going along, and you're going to see something called Nazca lines. Okay? Well, what these are is somebody in the 14th, 15th century, you are about maybe a mile in the air at least, all right? And what you're looking at here is a hummingbird, what somebody thought a hummingbird looked like. But from the ground, it's so big you can't tell anything. All right, now I'm going to tell you a funny story about this. I don't do very well in planes and ships and stuff moving around, right? But we go up in a plane, it's a small plane. Maybe 10 people in it, okay? Probably more like 8 with the pilots, okay? And we're going along and I'm doing great. All of a sudden the pilot says, oh, there they are, there's the hummingbird. And he banks very sharply to the right. And I'm going, uh-oh. And then he goes, there's something else, there's the whale. And he banks very sharply to the left. And what he's doing is he's trying to get the plane at the right angle so you can look. Well, after his second bank, I threw up in a bag. All right? And I was very embarrassed. But when I got back, there were 3 other people that had thrown up on the plane too. But that's a Nazca line, and that's a hummingbird. There's probably about 18 different ones in this desert. Now think about this. Those are still there 5 or 6 centuries later, so there's not much water for erosion there. Okay? All right, and here we have the, this is the pelican. Okay? You can see it in here like this. All right? But they're very, very, very interesting, very intricate. But you can see people have made roads and gone across them, unfortunately. Okay, and those are Nazca lines, and there's like 18 of them, and this was an actual scheduled flight that took you out there. Okay, Nazca lines. And that's it for the Incas. Okay, so that night, we spent that night in Lima, and the next day, we went to Lima Airport and took a flight. Believe it or not, there were riots going on, so we took a flight to a different airport than we were supposed to go. And we ended up staying there, like in our hotel room overnight, because we couldn't do anything. And then the next day, they flew us out to the Galapagos Islands. Now, the Galapagos Islands are volcanic islands, probably a couple thousand miles off the shore of the coast of Ecuador, okay? And nobody lived there for a long time, but the reason they're so important is because the animals have been left there and the plants have been left there, and they've developed into some very different things than what we have. And they're called the Galapagos Islands, but the person that really made them famous was a man named Charles Darwin, and he got there and he talked about the birds and he talked about the different kinds of wildlife there. But the animals are very calm, okay? Now, the reason I have this here is, here's a sea lion. Here's a sea lion. That's a restaurant chair for somebody. And the sea lion is just sleeping there, okay? And we had flown in that day, and then we went on a walk around town, and then we got to this dock. These restaurants are on this dock and stuff, and we were looking around, and there's sea lions everywhere. But this one was just sitting on a chair in a restaurant. I don't know if he had ordered any food or anything yet or not, but he was pretty calm. Okay, so that's a sea lion. Next, everywhere on the shore, every island we went to, everything, were these kinds of crabs. Very, very colorful. They're called Sally Lightfoot crabs. And the strange thing is, nothing eats them. No birds, no sea lions, nothing eats them. Okay, but they're everywhere. But look at that color, red and yellow. That's a Sally Lightfoot crab. Okay, now on the way walking to our cruise boat, which it was, and I wouldn't call it a cruise ship because there were only 12 passengers on it. Here's another sea lion. Okay, I'm only 10 feet away, and all it's doing is just sitting there sleeping. You know, nothing bothers it, so you know, why should it do anything? It's just sitting there sleeping. Now, the reason it's on the cement there is because the cement picked up some heat during the day, and it's sitting there, you know, like any other mammal would. It's just trying to pick up a little heat so it feels better. Okay, so this is before we've left on our cruise. All right, now remember I said that the animals and plants are different than you find anywhere. Excuse me. Well, this is a Galapagos Island cactus. Very different, very different. Now, over here, we have cactuses like this, prickly pear cactuses, but we don't have anything exactly like that in the United States, okay? When things get to an island over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they gradually change, all right? So that was on our walk that night. Okay, now, that night, we cruised all night, and we went to another island, okay? On this island were what we call Galapagos finches. Now, these are the finches that Charles Darwin said. He said, you know, these finches have changed to fill different areas. So this guy up here with that big beak ate seeds. And this one down here with a much smaller beak was digging in the rocks to find critters and things living in there. But Darwin found, I believe, 9 or 10 actual different kinds of beaks amongst these Darwin finches. But the beaks were the only thing that was different. The rest of them, their bodies were the same, all right? And that helped Darwin. All right, now, in the olden days, there was no such thing as a postal service or whatever. But the guys that would, on these boats that were out there in these, sailboats or whatever, they actually used this area for a post office, and they would put their letters in there, and then the next boat that came in would go through the letters and deliver them back home. So this is all the people we were with, all right, at the post office in the Galapagos Islands, all right? And we actually picked up some postcards that somebody had left there, and we delivered them to some places here in Illinois. But there were stacks of postcards there, and we went through them and delivered some of them, okay? Really, really nice people. All right, next. Okay, again, sea lions off the coasts of the Galapagos Islands. Now, obviously, this is the male up here, and these are probably females down here, but the sea lions were just everywhere. Okay, as a matter of fact, this guy right here was so friendly. We were actually snorkeling here, and this guy kept coming up and looking in our bags and wanting to play with people and everything. And look how calm he is. He's just playing. And then there's another one out here, and you would be swimming out in the ocean, or you're out, not necessarily swimming, but what you're doing, you're snorkeling, and they would just swim by and look at you and then swim off again. Okay, So that's another sea lion playing with people. Now, I'm going to show you Galapagos Island tortoises later. But this right here is a green sea turtle. And they don't come ashore, and you don't see them very well, so this was a really good picture of a green sea turtle. And the only time they come ashore in their whole life is to lay eggs. But that's a good picture of it, and the water was really calm there and everything. So that's a green sea turtle. All right, now my wife Ann got this picture of a snake on one of the beaches we were on. Pretty good sized snake. Now, knowing anything about snakes, you know they eat rodents and mice, and rats and stuff like that. There aren't very many rats on here, but there are some rodents and stuff. So that's a pretty good sized snake. The only place in the world you can find that snake is in the Galapagos Islands. Next. Okay. Now, we were snorkeling, and all of a sudden we came up on, in the beach, you know, there's only about 2 or 3 inches of water here, all these stingrays. Okay? And what they do is that the waves that are breaking on the shore stirs up the sand, and it stirs up things for them to eat, and they filter it out of the water. You know, look here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16 of them. They're big. Okay? Now, I mean, they're not going to hurt you or anything, but we sat and watched those for quite a while, and that was something we did not expect to see. Okay? Those are stingrays right on the shore. Another day. Okay? This is a yellow warbler on the beach, and the only reason I took that picture is because it was such a nice color. That's not a Galapagos finch, that's a yellow warbler. The only place you find those are in the Galapagos Islands. Okay? Now, that is an albatross flying. Okay? It's not the best picture of an albatross, but I want you to understand, albatrosses have the longest wingspan of any bird. Albatrosses have the longest, widest wingspan of any bird in the world. They're just enormous, and they're built perfectly for gliding. Okay? On one of our other trips, somebody pointed out some of these birds don't land on shore for 5 or 6 years. Now this guy, you know, in the islands there, nothing really bothers them, but they're just huge. And all that, I mean, they don't flap much. All they do is just glide. And they can glide for miles and miles and miles. And in the background there, you can kind of see what the vegetation was on these islands. That's pretty much the way it was all the way. And that's an albatross. Okay, here's another kind of lizard. Okay, out sunning on the rocks. You know, it's a cold-blooded animal, so some of its body heat's got to come from the rocks. And it just sat there, it didn't run away when we got there. Okay, next. Okay, one day we went on a hike, and we'd been going probably for 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and found this, what he termed smallish turtle there. That's a female in the middle of the path. Okay? Now, you see those white and black stakes there. Well, we got to get around it. So we kind of walked up there, and the female turtle just kind of looked, and she wasn't going to move much. There wasn't much to it, but that's a female Galapagos tortoise. Now, look at the size of that, and then this. That's the male. And he's probably 600 or 700 pounds. Right? And this is like here, this is like a tent or a canopy. He's just sitting in there trying to keep, you know, cool. All right, and that's part of our hike that day. All right? Then we're hiking, and we've got our main guide with us, and then there's a younger guy. On the way back, I tripped once, and I got up. Are you all right? Yes, I'm all right. Well, about half mile later, I tripped again, and a stick went into my leg, and I cut my finger, so the blood's coming pretty good. And I was just mad at myself for tripping. but they bandaged up my finger and they bandaged up my leg, and I got a big scar on my leg, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I have the shorts I had on that day that were torn. Okay, now we got there and everybody goes, "Oh, you all right?" "Yes." "Okay, fine." Well, you know, you think about it, then you've got to get out in the salt water. Well, the salt water kills all the bacteria, but so I got damaged walking back from that big Galapagos tortoise. Okay, now, I don't suppose any of you have ever seen this, and I'm talking about that right there. So think about it. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about what you think that is. Well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. That's turtle poop. That's what that is. It's dry, it'll burn, whatever, but that's turtle poop. It's been just laying there in the path and decided to take a picture of it. Okay, another lizard, a brown and white striped lizard. Okay, you see his coloration kind of protects him from everything that's going on in there. And if you want to know the truth, I think I saw him as I was laying on the ground, the guy bandaging up my leg. All right? But that's another lizard that's on the island there. Okay. On the last day that we were out on the boat, they took us to this island, and we walked up, and it had a freshwater lagoon in the middle of it. Well, sometimes there were hundreds of flamingos. That's what those are, is flamingos. Sometimes there were hundreds of those there. But on this day, there weren't that many. But they had wild flamingos living on the islands there. But in the back, look, that's what the trees and all the plants usually look like on the Galapagos Islands. But that's a nice place in the middle of one of, I think, the Santa Lucia Island. Okay, now, one day, my wife and I were able to get some really good underwater pictures. Now look at those. We took those pictures with an underwater camera. Those are king angelfish. Just beautiful, but the water was cold, very cold. All right, and it was kind of rough that day. So those are king angelfish. All right, the next one here, look at that. That's a bump-headed parrotfish. But you can see the bottom down there and see some corals growing in there and stuff. But it was very cold. One guy, you know, you could rent wetsuits, all right, and they recommend it. But one guy says, I don't need that. So he went snorkeling without a wetsuit in this really, really cold part of the ocean, and they had to haul him out and get him warmed up because he was turning blue. But that's a bump-headed parrotfish. Okay, now look at that. We were in the water and a sea lion swam by. Look at that. Just swimming by to see what we were doing. Great picture. Ann got a really good picture on that one. Okay, now this is a captive Galapagos Island tortoise. His name is Diego. All right, he's fathered over 1,000 baby Galapagos tortoises. Now, the reason he's called Diego is because he was captured when he was very young and taken to San Diego Zoo. Well, then San Diego Zoo said they didn't want him anymore, so they sent him back to the Galapagos Islands. Anyway, that's Diego, and he's got a little pen there. You can see the walls back there, and they feed him every day, and he's real happy. That's Diego. All right, now that's one of the other turtles feeding. They live a pretty good life. They eat pretty well, but you can tell that they're really, really big. Even the small females are, you know, a couple 100 pounds. Now, one of the reasons they got close to extinction is because sailors would come along and they would capture these things and they'd put them on their ships. Well, they would live basically forever until they're going around, so they would be a source of fresh meat that they didn't even have to take care of on the ship. They'd put it down in the hold or whatever, and they'd use them for fresh meat. And some of the islands don't have any tortoises on them now, but they're trying to repopulate them there. Okay, look at all the babies. Those are like a year old. Those turtles are huge, but they're a year old. Now, you see that these in here have red spots on them. That tells you what island they came from. Those are baby tortoises, and that's a captive program. I mean, they're raising lots and lots and lots of baby tortoises, hundreds of them, to repopulate these islands. All right, but so that was the last day we were there, and we went to see this captive program. Okay, now after we got back from the Galapagos Islands, we went to Guayaquil in Ecuador, and we did a little tour of Guayaquil. Now, Guayaquil is a nice city. It's, you know, it's very, it's different, whatever. But they showed us this park. That's a city park. Now, if you notice, yeah, there's pigeons there. All right, look at these guys. Those are big, stinking lizards. Now, this says, basically, it says closed, do not walk in. Who would walk in there with something like that sitting there? All right, but they just live there in the park. You can see there's a little fence around them, but that was in Guayaquil, Ecuador. Okay, and we're done. That is the end of our South American trip.